Welcome, Douglas County. We too loud? Okay, good. Thank you so much for coming to celebrate the inspired document of this country, the Constitution of the United States. We are so grateful that you have come to celebrate this with us. We have some youth here today. We did invite. We left it open for some youth to come. Well, thank you for coming, and we think you'll enjoy this as well. We have some pretty decent weather today, don't we? The air quality is pretty good compared to what it's been in the last few days. I think that's because there's been a lot of prayers gone out for this to happen. The Lord's wanted this program to happen, and we are grateful for that. My name is Tim Jewett. The Founding Fathers often spoke of divine providence many, many times in the formation of our nation, in the battling and winning of the Revolutionary War. And I think he's in the works here today too, as we mentioned. We are going to have a Pledge of Allegiance. I haven't seen you here yet. Lloyd Kesterson, are you here? Okay. Lloyd, while he's on his way up, Lloyd Kesterson is a veteran naval officer, a naval pilot. He was stationed in Guam in the 1960s. So he's a veteran. We're glad to have him here and all of you other veterans. Directly after the Pledge of Allegiance, we will have our local Reverend Joe Sizemore, pastor of the new Renewed Ministry Church, offer the prayer. Right after the prayer, we're going to have our musical person, Ken Averett, thank you for being here, provide the Star Spangled Banner for us, and we'll go to that point.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, we know the flag represents a lot. Millions of people over the years have made this country happen. A lot of us have paid the price. Many haven't. I just want to say one thing, that standing for the flag is a tradition we must do. Using it as an excuse for social media is not appropriate. And I believe that two things were said that makes a lot of sense. One is, I stand for the flag, and I stand for the anthem, and I kneel before God. So, if you will join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
You remain standing that we pray. Ask God divine direction upon this today as we celebrate life. Father, we ask you in your Son Jesus' name. We pray for America today, that God will renew love instead of hate. We ask for the power of Almighty God to touch our military men and women who stand for America. We ask that we celebrate this fine country today, God, that you will touch us and give us wisdom and knowledge as leaders of this United States to do what is right. We pray, dear God, that your power and your spirit would flow through America one more time. God, to touch us, Lord, I pray and renew your strength. God, we lift you up this morning, God, and we ask for your power and your glory to flood this place. God, we ask, God, you would just touch everyone here this morning this afternoon, God, that you would just be with us, God. And we celebrate America. And we ask, God, that you would touch our firefighters and touch those who have lost homes. And we ask you to touch upon Oregon, God, that you would minister, God, and those that would vote, God, to vote for the peace and liberty of America. And God, we are believing you right now. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
You may be seated while we listen to the Star Spangled Banner. I give was his stay standing. Now you may be seated. Thank you, Lloyd, for leading the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Pastor Joe, for the wonderful prayer. We have a wonderful lineup of speakers today. We have 3 speakers, intermingled with some patriotic music. I'm going to introduce at this time our first speaker is David Jakes. David is the publisher of the Roseburg Beacon, a popular independent weekly newspaper in Oregon, which has paid subscribers in all 50 states. He and his wife Marcia have lived in Douglas County for the past 33 years, where they have raised their 5 children, and he is now a grandfather of 13. In addition to his role as publisher and executive editor of the Beacon, David is the principal broker and owner of Alpine Real Estate and has been a licensed broker in Oregon for over 20 years. David has been active in grassroots politics in Oregon for more than 44 years and has worked both as grassroots volunteer and paid consultant for many campaigns, from county commissioner and congressional races to presidential campaigns. He has traveled to the nation's capital on numerous occasions, attended 4 Republican national conventions and many national conferences, including the Council on National Policy, CPAC, and LPAC. He was the host of a popular radio show in the 1990s, which aired daily following the Rush Limbaugh show. David has a passion for the U.S. Constitution, which he has studied extensively. He will share some of his observations with us today. Welcome, David.
All right, thank you, Tim. I want to give a hand to Tim Jewett, who put this together today, organized all this, got the sound and lights guys and audio, video, and all of that. Tim's done a fantastic job of putting this together. And thank you for turning out. You know, we were all wondering as we started this week, everyone here, what's Thursday going to look like? You know, is it going to be smoky? You know, about 4 days ago, we couldn't see that parking lot over there. Couldn't see it. So the air quality is great today, and thank God for that, answer to prayer. But you know what else? In the air today, right now, is liberty, right? And, excuse me, I have to tell you, from my perspective, liberty has been under assault for a long time, and especially as of late. So when we talk today about the Constitution, and I've entitled my remarks, Making the Constitution Relevant Again. See, the Constitution, we've been taught over the years, is a living, breathing document. It's subject to all kinds of change and adaptation to the new mores and traditions of America, and that's not true. Hi, sweetie. It's not true. So we have a great heritage, and if you notice lately, you know, one of the things that's been happening is we're seeing all of our institutions challenged, aren't we? From law enforcement, to our first responders, to our military, our flag, our monuments, on and on and on. But you know what? We have, and all of you have a Constitution with you today, right? I think we handed them out. So, not yet?
Not yet. Do you want to do that now?
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Just at the appropriate time. But everyone's going to leave here today with a pocket Constitution. And what's interesting is right here is the blueprint for liberty. And these men were thinking generationally. So when they put these words down, and I'm going to share some of the founders' thoughts with you as we go through this, but when they put these words down, they did it for generations to come. They weren't thinking about what was right in front of them. And this is foreign to us today. We don't have that kind of leadership, is not common today. Now, there are some exceptions. And Tim has asked me to not be particularly political about any particular statesman, so I won't name names, but I think you know who is really trying to address America's heritage and restore that to what it once was. And I think that's a great opportunity for us all. There's a book that I've been using for a number of years. It's called The Constitution of the United States, Its Sources and Its Applications, and it is still in print. We were going to, and I still plan to pursue this, we were going to print these and give them out to graduating high school students. We thought it was out of print, but we find that it is back in print, so we are going to try to acquire a volume and give them out to high school graduates. But in this book, I want to read a couple of things. First of all, this was in 1965, and it says, this book, The Constitution of the United States, Its Sources and Applications, is presented to you on your graduation with the hope that it will give you a better understanding and appreciation of your great heritage as a citizen of the United States. And this was compliments of W.H. Cowles, publisher of the Spokesman Review newspaper. And it was in recognition of your graduation from Lewis and Clark High School in 1965. So that inspired me, and I think that's something we would like to repeat. But at the front of this book are some really profound words, and it says this, and keep in mind, this first printing of this book was in 1941. And this is what it says: menaced by collectivist trends, we must seek revival of our strength in the spiritual foundations which are the bedrock of our republic. Democracy is the outgrowth of the religious conviction of the sacredness of every human life. Amen. On the religious side, its highest embodiment is the Bible. On the political, the Constitution. As has been said so well, the Constitution is the civil Bible of Americans. Next to the Bible, the best book on the Constitution should be in every home, school, library, and parish hall. And we're going to try to do our small part to spread that. But there's something else, and then I want to give some other remarks. But from this book is so profound. It says in the preface, in this era of worldwide social and political change, back in 1941, it behooves us as never before to know the fundamentals of our Constitution, which in times of stress, like today, as well as in peace, It has provided the American people with a more enduring and practical government and greater degree of prosperity than any other people have ever had. Now think about that. In a time of stress, what are we going to rely on? This document, the framework for our liberty, which was followed soon after with the Bill of Rights, the original 10 amendments to the Constitution. And I'm sure most of the people here know this, but I need to just say it. I always like to say that the Bill of Rights is not where we get our rights. Okay? The rights come from God. The Bill of Rights was a set of chains to bind the government from encroaching on those rights. And so making the Constitution relevant again has many aspects to it. We've already talked about the Constitution being the civil Bible. I want to talk about a couple of our founders, what they said about this miraculous document. And John Adams said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and a religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." So part of the problem we have when we talk about making the Constitution relevant again is restoring our roots, our faith in God, and our understanding of morality. We have had every single one of those areas challenged, and I won't name them all. You know what they are. And it seems like in the last 2 decades, it's stuff that we experience today, you would have never thought of 20 years ago, 30 years. You would have never thought, if somebody told you, that's going to happen. Do you know you're going to be quartered in your own house and made to do this, this, and this? You would have laughed at them and said, "That's ridiculous. Go away from me, you foolish person." And yet, here we are. So the Constitution, apparently, to some, is less relevant. But you know what? We don't need their permission to make it relevant again, right? That's up to us. And I think that's why you came today. Also, I want to talk a little bit about what kind of a government we got when we had this beautiful Constitution bequeathed to us. And you've heard the story many times about Ben Franklin. The woman outside Independence Hall said, Sir, what kind of government have you given us?" And he said, "We've given you a republic, madam, if you can keep it." And that's the question that we're struggling with today. Can we keep it? Will we keep it? We can. We have the tools. Do we have the will? So that's for each of us individually to answer. Also, there's some things about what can the Constitution do and not do. And by the way, I forgot to say at the beginning of my remarks, did you know that the Constitution contains 4,508 words? Now, some of the articles in the Beacon aren't that big, but some of them are up to 1,800 words long, so just about double that, and you could have read the whole Constitution, word for word, all of it. So I tried that out. Somebody told me you could read it, you could recite it out loud in 24 minutes. That was, yes. That was, but I did it myself, and it took me about 31, maybe. I just paused, some grammatical pauses. But if I was on a speed test, I bet I'd get it down to about 19. But anyway, the point is, these 4,508 words contain all of the framework to put this republic into motion and put the limitations on the government who would want to continue to accrue to themselves additional powers that simply aren't there. And so what is there? What are the limits of the Constitution? And find my note. So Madison, James Madison, who is our 4th president, said this: "The powers of the federal government are enumerated. It can only operate in certain cases, it being the federal government. It has legislative powers on defined and limited objects." Now, pause there for a minute. We'll come back to it. On defined and limited objects, beyond which it cannot exceed or extend its jurisdiction. It can't extend beyond those limits. So enumerated powers, we hear that. We don't talk like that today. We don't say, "Honey, would you get the enumerated grocery list for me? I'm going to go get some things." It's numbers. So there's some numbered powers. There's 7 articles in the Constitution in those 4,000 plus words. And in it, they enumerate the powers that go to the federal government. And they come from whom? They come from us. We got our rights from God, but we delegated those powers to the federal government. They work for us. We don't work for them. We don't work for the Forest Service or the BLM. And God bless some of you who I know in the audience have worked for those agencies, but you've seen their mission change over the years. And they're not serving us anymore, are they? So we have a forestry policy that's ended in this disaster this last week that, hundreds of families have been impacted, thousands dislocated from their homes, and it's been going on for far too long. If we're going to have any hope of restoring that and getting them back to their enumerated powers, we better be very careful in our choice this election. And it's extremely, extremely important. I know that you know that. How am I doing? Time.
I'm doing great.
I can have 5 minutes, he says. Okay, because there's so many directions we could go with this, and there's so many things I feel very passionate about with this subject. But, one of the things when we're looking at the relevancy of the Constitution is you've heard, how many have heard about a constitutional convention? How many people have heard about that? And it's confusing because we've heard that from some people that we have a lot in common with other times, and so it sounded reasonable to some of you. It really did. But let me assure you, just take my word just for a few minutes today and then go do your own research. It's bad. It's really, really bad. You think in terms of a Trojan horse, you think of people like Franklin and Madison and Booker T. Washington and all the men that were around the early formation of this country and its founding. Those kind of people aren't going to be at the table at the next Constitutional Convention, folks. And they'll tell you, oh, no, listen, Mark Levin is one, and I have a lot of respect for Mark Levin on many subjects. And he's got a lot of courage to take some of the topics on that he takes on. But he's wrong on this one, and I'll tell you why. One of the reasons why is that Article 5, and you can read it right in those 4,504, you can read it right there what Article 5 does. But once they open that convention, he'll say, well, it's just, only thing we're going to do is everyone wants a balanced budget. We want to balance our budget, not spend more than we take in, like we all have to, right? So to just do that, it'll be limited to that, and I'll be able to just get in and out. False. Once they convene the convention will set their own rules. Any of you who've been involved in party politics know this. If you've ever been involved in any kind of organization that has parliamentary procedure, that has Robert's Rules of Order, you know that once that convention is open, they set the rules for the convention, and the whole Constitution is out on the operating table. Oh, let's take this one out here. We don't need that. And, use your imagination what the focus might be. But put it this way, this one right here, this little tiny pamphlet, which, by the way, this pamphlet in this size not only has the entire Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, it fits in your breast pocket. That's the whole thing. It's 233 years old. It's worked really well. And we've gone through a lot of trials in this country and a lot of stress. And yes, civil rights, has been one of those. And we have overcome a great deal, but we did it within the framework of this Constitution. Now, free speech is smashing out the windows of the Republican headquarters 2 blocks from here, painting obscenities on the public building. That's misrepresented today as free speech. It's not in here. I won't bore you with reading the First Amendment, but it's not in here, okay? So I'm going to conclude with just one thought, I guess. First of all, again, thank you for being here. Thanks for caring about this subject, and I know that we're all going to leave here today. We've got some other excellent speakers. We're going to leave inspired that we can make a difference. We're going to reclaim this Constitution. We're going to make it relevant again. The thought I leave you with is there's a bill in Oregon. It's not a bill. It's law. It's ORS 336057, and here's what it says. This is the Oregon statutory law. Courses in the Constitution and the history of the United States in all public schools. Courses of instruction shall be given in the Constitution of the United States and in the history of the United States, and these courses shall, 1, begin not later than the opening 8th grade and shall continue in grades 9 through 12, and 2, shall be required in all public universities listed in ORS 352, etc. Do you for 1 minute think this is being done? The answer is most certainly it is not being done. So the first thing we do, and I talked to our representative Gary Leaf, who's outstanding, and about this last night. He helped me get this law because I knew it was out there, but I couldn't lay my finger on it. So he had legislative counsel pull it in the wee hours last night so I could have it this morning. But we need to emphasize with them, and the other thing, the other prong on that one is, and we're going to be hearing about education today, but the other prong is getting on the school boards and making sure this is done. Now the other side of it is, who teaches the Constitution? We certainly don't want certain people, we don't want Rachel Maddow teaching it, but maybe we should just have it only taught by Hillsdale College professors, and specifically maybe Clarence Thomas. Maybe he could teach it and no one else. But anyway, you get the idea. We got to get this back, folks, because what they're replacing it with is the new Green Deal and this bogus idea of climate change and the virus, and we won't go into that, but on and on and on. This is what the kids are getting pummeled with every day. So I'll leave you with a very last thought. I'm like the Baptist preacher who says, yeah, just one more last thought. But here it is. There are 10 amendments in the original Bill of Rights, and you're familiar with most of them: the first, second, third, the fourth, sixth. You that's about housing people, and can't house them. But the ninth is probably my favorite, and that is because it isn't enumerated, meaning numbered, not listed here, doesn't mean it's not your right. Now that's right before the 10th Amendment that said all the rights that aren't given to the federal government by this Constitution are reserved to who? The states and the people. That's the 10th. But right before it says, and if we didn't list it here, it's still yours. So anyway, thank you so much for your kind attention. We got some great speakers to follow. Have a beautiful day, and let's let freedom ring again in this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David Jakes. David is now our MC. I'm turning that over to him. But we are first going to listen to America the Beautiful, and then David will announce the rest of the program.
Fantastic. You know, Tim wanted me to mention to you, yes, applause, that we were going to have the Air National Guard band here. There were some challenges because of COVID and other things, but if you all think, and we're so pleased with the turnout, but if you all think you'd like to see that next year, we can make those arrangements. You want to give us a hand of applause if you think that would be good. So that would be fun just to add to the excitement. Well, we got some great speakers to follow, and first of all is going to be Robin Follett. She's a local attorney here in Roseburg. Having previously studied in economics and political science, she has a love and a passion for the founding fathers and a great reverence for our founding documents. And she and her husband, Dr. Steve Follett, have been married 41 years. Steve is right there. Steve, wave to us. Steve is an anesthesiologist here in town, and they're very committed to our cause and the cause of liberty. So her topic is, and by the way, she gets to advertise too. She has 3 sons and 8 grandchildren, so that's exciting as well. And her topic is going to be balance of power, and with that, we'll welcome Robin to the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate Mr. Jack's comments, and some of the things I have to say are going to overlap with what he has to say, but you know, that's not a bad thing necessarily. I mean, I just want to start. I had a defining experience in my life. It happened when I was 15 years old, and it was in 1976, and I was listening to a speech on television by Ronald Reagan as he was challenging then President Gerald Ford for the Republican nomination for the president. And as he spoke, I don't remember, I couldn't recite the exact words that I heard, but I remember what I felt. And as he talked about individual freedom and the true purpose of government and the promise of what the United States should be, I was deeply touched. And even at 15 years old, and I was never the same. And as sort of a calling, it has inspired me to continue on through the next 45 years of my life to study and to find out exactly what I believed in these things meant, what I believed that liberty meant, what I believed the purpose of government was, and what I believed the promise of the founding documents of the United States, namely the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Our founding fathers were knowledgeable about history and politics and philosophy, and they were also students of the Enlightenment, an intellectual and philosophical movement that gave us philosophers like John Locke and Hobbes and Rousseau and Voltaire and Adam Smith. And drawing on the ideas of these men and their own experiences, they formulated the ideals that were embedded in the Declaration of Independence and then institutionalized in the Constitution. Locke was primarily inspired by, he had primarily inspired Thomas Jefferson as he wrote about unalienable rights and liberties granted to us by our Creator, as Mr. Jacks talked about. Locke's number of these rights as life, liberty, and property. In his second treatise of the government, John Locke wrote, "To understand political power right and derive it from its original, we must consider what state all men are naturally in, and that is the state of perfect freedom to order their actions and dispose of their possessions and persons as they think fit, within the bounds of the law of nature, without asking leave or depending upon the will of any other man." And the reason it's important to recognize and understand that all mankind are born with these rights is the next step. What is the purpose of government? Locke's philosophy purported that all men, that we're all free in nature, and we all have these rights granted to us just by being human. And as we practice these freedoms, and they interfere with the practice of others practicing their freedoms, and as they interfere with us, we necessarily need to join into a social compact or a political society. And the purpose of that is to keep us, so that we do this to be able to protect ourselves from others interfering with us and from us interfering with others. So if you imagine an imaginary circle, if you think of a circle and the power inside this circle is all of the power that's granted to a kingdom or a nation. And imagine this large, and throughout all of history, with just a few exceptions, there has been what the king or the ruler or the emperor encompasses all of that power. He's the one that has absolute power in that kingdom or in that nation. And at his whim or whatever, he might choose to carve out a little bit of rights to the people. And in the time of the colonists, that's what the kings had done. Prior to them, the kings of England had carved out a little bit of rights that they delegated to the people in the form of decree or in a declaration, and that was the rights that they were able to practice. And at that time, that was premier. That wasn't happening throughout all the world. That was kind of unusual. And in fact, the colonists felt themselves blessed that they were Englishmen, because they had these rights of the Englishmen. They practiced these, and they were proud of them. So, but where the king grants those rights, he can also take them away. And he can do that at whim and at will and with no impunity. And that's what was going on the decades prior to the revolution. So contrast that with another circle, one that represents what our Constitution purports, and that is that the people are sovereign. The people have all the power, and all the power within that is ours, to do what we want. And then we, as we come together in this social compact, we decide that we carve out a little bit, and we decide that we are going to delegate that to our government. And then we retain all of that the rest of that power within that circle. So at the time, that's kind of a revolutionary idea at the time, to think that we the people have the power, that we the people are sovereign. But the framers' prime objective in establishing a government deriving its authority by the people and limiting its power to simple government purposes that were listed in the preamble, and we the people are, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. And their intent was to provide a strong government that would endure both between the bickerings and the things of the states and on the world stage, and without unduly encroaching upon our individual rights. And study had taught them, and experience had taught them, that the stronger and more powerful a government was, the more individual rights that were being trampled on. And so history had shown that those that endowed with power will continually to assume more and more power, and eventually, if not constrained, it will lead to tyranny. Therefore, the task was not only to create a limited government, but also one that would restrain itself. James Madison, in his famous quote from the Federalist 51, said, "What is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls would be necessary. In framing a government which is to be administered men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and the next instant oblige it to control itself." So the plan was to create an effective balance of power between the branches of the federal government, the states, and the people. And I would suggest that there's 3 general safeguards within the Constitution intended to promote this balance of power. And the first is what we refer to, and we talk about a lot, is the separation of powers and checks and balances. With this structure, not only is the government divided into the 3 branches, but they're also given powers to check one another. And the purpose of that is to keep them from none of those branches becoming too strong relative to the others, and to keep them from trampling on our individual rights. So obviously, and in order for this to work, they have to practice those checks. But, and I can think it could be debated probably for days whether or not this is actually happening in reality, whether or not they really are checking, and whether they really are keeping the other branches in check. And I think all of us would be right on all accounts. There's many instances throughout history where, and certainly in recent times, where there has been unchecked power grabs and abdications of power by all three branches. And it's my opinion that all three branches have expanded beyond what the framers intended. So if separation of powers is in horizontal check, then there's also a vertical check, and that is federalism. That's the, between the federal government and the state government. And the Constitution in its original form provided for the means of the balance of power between the federal and the state government. And I'm going to mention three things. First, the Constitution in its original form provided for 2 senators from each state to be elected by the state legislature. And then with the passage of the 17th Amendment, of course, now we elect them by popular vote. And I think now we kind of think about that. We don't even think about it, actually. We just assume that's what we would do. And you can argue whether that's good or bad, but I think it's arguably a valuable check that's on the national level that has been diminished. Second, the 10th Amendment is, as Mr. Jacks commented on, it's intended to reiterate and ensure that the federal government's powers are going to be limited, that they are specifically delegated and they're not going to move beyond. And as he stated, all of us will, the rest of the power beyond what is enumerated in the Constitution belongs to the states and the people. Well, over the years, what those powers are, what powers belong to the federal government, what powers belong to the state government has been debated and has been battled. And the arbiter of that boundary is ultimately the court. And so that depends on what the makeup of the court is. In recent years, I think with a few notable exceptions, the decisions have tended to lean toward federal power rather than state power. And so we just have to wait to see, I guess, which way that pendulum's going to swing in the future. And the third is the Electoral College, which is not just a tool of the states in checking the executive, but also the people against the powers of a pure democracy, or the majority the oppression of the minority by the majority, excuse me. The Electoral College is under attack, and you can hear that all the time. It's not just there are many who believe that its usefulness is outdated and that our president should be elected by popular vote. And one argument is that this is a modern age, we're educated, we have access to information. But however, its usefulness of empowering the states and the people of the states is not outdated. Eliminating the Electoral College would get rid of a central check that the states have and the people of the states have. Without the Electoral College, candidates won't need to appeal to, they only need to appeal to those that live in population hubs. So most likely the values and the whims of those living in urban areas would consistently rule the day. The last, and what I think is the most important area of balance of power, is between the federal government and the people. If what we profess is true, and the people are the true sovereigns of the nation, we have the power to determine what we want government to be. We have the ability to check government power, but only to the degree that we participate. Ronald Reagan said, "I hope we once again have reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited. There's a clear cause and effect here that is as neat and predictable as a law of physics. As government expands, liberty contracts, and when those who are governed do too little, those who govern can and often will do too much." This is where it's important that we truly understand and appreciate the value that we have as individuals and the power that we have as individuals, along with those rights granted to us at birth. Also comes responsibility to defend them. Each of us has an important part to play in limiting the size, scope, and power of government. In reference to that image of that circle that I mentioned before, where we are the sovereign and we have all the power and we've delegated that portion to the federal government, if we don't practice that power, if we don't exercise the power that we have, and we can create a vacuum, the government will be happy to fill that vacuum and expand its power. Our individual liberties are at stake. And among those are the freedom of conscience, and the freedom of speech, and the freedom to worship how we want to, and the freedom to have control over the fruits of our labor. By having the freedom to control the fruits of our labor, we really can dictate what our life is going to look like. But as we surrender greater portions of the fruits of our labors to an ever-expanding government, the more control, we're granting them more control over the decisions of our life. So what is our responsibility? First, we need to inform ourselves from good and reputable sources, and second, we need to vote. Thomas Jefferson stated, "We do not have government by majority, we have government by the majority who participate." Vote for principles rather than personalities. Ask yourself if this person is interested in respecting and preserving my individual liberties, or is this person trying to pander or buy my vote? Do they stand with me and try to empower me to determine my own destiny, or are they trying to empower the government to make decisions for me? Additionally, just because you voted for someone once doesn't necessarily mean you need to vote for them again. If we vote for someone because we believe that they'll stand for certain things and they don't meet our reasonable expectations, then shame on them. But if we re-elect them, or worse, we don't vote at all, then shame on us. Ronald Reagan said, "Freedom is a fragile thing and is never more than one generation away from extinction. It's not ours by inheritance. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation, for it comes only once to a people. Those who have known freedom and then lost it have never known it again." And if you'll bear with me, I just want to leave you with a portion of that talk, that speech by Ronald Reagan that inspired me many years ago. "I believe this nation hungers for a spiritual revival, hungers to once again see honor placed above political expediency, to see government once again the protector of our liberties, not the distributor of gifts and privileges. Government should uphold and not undermine those institutions which are custodians of the very values upon which civilization is founded: religion, education, and above all, family. Government cannot be clergy, teacher, and patriot. Government is our servant, beholden to us." And he goes on to say, "I would like to see this country restore government not only of and for, but by the people, to see the American spirit unleashed once again, to make this land the shining golden hope God intended it to be." Thank you.
Wow, that was excellent, Robin. Thank you so much. And one of the things that Robin touched on, I just wanted to reiterate, and that is get yourself in front of good, solid constitutional teaching. And we have an opportunity for that at the end of this meeting. There's some tables over here, and there's going to be a 6-week course on the Constitution, 1 day a week. Dates aren't really set yet, but if you want to be advised of that, and get to know this document a little better, it's so important. One thing is to have rights, the other is to exercise them, but if you don't know what they are, kind of hard to exercise them. And Cleon Skousen had a group once called the National Center for Constitutional Studies, and I worked through his materials for many years, a brilliant guy. David Barton with Wall Builders is another one, more into the founders of this country and their Christian testimony and their lives and what they did to make this country. So those are a couple of tools. Sign up here too. But Robin, thank you so much for those remarks. Now next we're going to have Al Authorly, and I don't know Al very well, but I'll tell you something I do know about Al. He and his wife Rebecca drove all the way down here from almost Tacoma to come and speak to you today. So I know one thing about Al. He's got some commitment and he cares deeply about this subject, about this Constitution, and about this country. Al is a Messianic Jew, and he, is that Larry over there? And clapping, because Larry is from that heritage too. He's a nurse in the Tacoma area, is that right? Are you an RN or what kind of? Okay, so that's in itself a great feat. But we're so anxious to hear what Al has to share with us. He's also a chapter leader of the John Birch Society up there in the Tacoma area, and he's been very outspoken. And I happen to know, let him get into it probably, but some rather courageous efforts he's made on behalf of that fine organization. And if you're not familiar with him, again, an opportunity at the end here. Not a recruiting thing, not anything like that, but just so you get some knowledge about it. A very patriotic, solid group that I've followed for probably 40 plus years, and they're very ethical. So with that, I'm going to welcome Al to the microphone. I'm anxious to hear what he has to share with us. Thank you.
Well, greetings.
Greetings.
And first of all, thank you, Tim, the guy who wrangled me into this. Thank you, esteemed speakers, and thank you, honored guests. Thanks to my wife for supporting me, and thank you to my Heavenly Father for making the way. So, I see a number of caps in the audience of brothers and sisters that served. And so, first of all, I'd like to, I'm going to share with you. And I want to tell you something I learned as a brand new lieutenant. One of my NCOs pulled me aside in the Army and told me, he said, "Lieutenant, there are fairy tales and there are war stories. Do you know the difference?" And I said, "No, Sergeant, I do not." And he said, "Let me tell you the difference. A fairy tale starts once upon a time. A war story starts, no lie, there I was, surrounded on all sides." So today, I'd like to tell you a thing, and then I'm going to remind you how this all ties together with that thing at the end. So first of all, my fairy tale. There was a CPA, and it was the height of tax season, and he was very busy, and as many CPAs around the country, they tend to get busy. My daughter-in-law is an accountant working on getting her CPA, and their lives are consumed at tax time. And so he gathered a bunch of paperwork hurriedly together, brought it home, and was going to work at home and then go back to the office, finish up, close up, and get ready to come back for the next day, having forgotten a very important promise that he had made to his little boy. "When I get home today, I'll play catch with you, son." So he got home and he got into his office, and the little boy comes in holding a ball and a couple of gloves saying, "Daddy, Daddy, can we go out and play ball, play catch now?" And he says, "Son, no, I've got some work to do. I'll get with you later." And so the little boy, he went ahead and went outside, but as little boys are, they're impatient, and after throwing the ball up for a minute or two, he comes back, he goes, Daddy, are you done? Can we go outside now?" His father, getting a little frustrated because of the stress on him at the time and the things that were really important, said, "Son, I'll get with you in a minute. Go back outside and play, and I'll come out when I'm done." So the little boy, a little bit shoulder slumped, dejected, he went back out, threw the ball up in the air and caught it himself and lost interest in that real fast. And then he comes back in and he says, Daddy, can you come play ball with me now?" At which point his dad, like unfortunately many of us as parents have done over time, he lost and he said, "Look, I'm doing some things here that are very important. A lot of people are depending on me. I told you, I'll get with you later." At which point he pulls a magazine off the shelf, rips the cover off, tears the pieces up, and throws it on the floor. He said, there's a picture of the globe. When you get that together, I'll come out and play with you." And the little boy, with his shoulders slumped, tears welling up in his eyes and his lips sticking out, just meekly gathered up the pieces and shuffled off to come back 5 minutes later to his father's amazement. And he says humbly, as he presented this picture of the globe all taped together correctly, he said, "How did you get that together?" And the little boy said, "Daddy, it was easy. On the back of the picture of the world, there was the picture of a man. All I had to do was get the man together, and the whole world fell into place." My war story. In 2012, I had been out of the Army for a few years, getting my family together, working very, very hard, but not getting ahead. And I thought I'd get out of the military and do very, very well. But things like taxes and inflations and regulations kept getting bigger and bigger and overcoming. And I looked at a lot of these things and I thought, you know what? I don't think that's fair. That's not right. I'm about doing my part for my country. But the more that I tried to get ahead, the more there was something standing in the way. You buy a house, and you never really own that house because they tax the life out of you with that house. You'd go and buy a piece of property, and there'd be all kinds of regulations on the property as to what you could and couldn't do as far as land use was concerned. And I would think, you know, that's my property. My kids were in school, and all kinds of things started happening with the schools that I definitely didn't appreciate. And I didn't remember when I was growing up, most likely because I didn't see them, and number two, because they had become more and more heinous. And so my wife and I decided that I'd get involved in politics. Not as a candidate, even though I'd been asked, but helping other people out. And so in 2012, I found myself at the rally of a presidential candidate, and a buddy of mine who I hadn't seen in years was there. And he said, "Hey, I'm running for Congress. How'd you like to help me out?" I said, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll help you out." He said, "How'd you like to be my campaign manager?" I had no idea, but I got an education, and I had a very constitutionally sound candidate who came from the back of the pack, and we were saying all the right things. But what would happen, we'd run up against well-meaning people of the party that I was associated with, people who said that they were about the Constitution, and these people would look at us and the campaign that we were running, and they would say, "Well, we really like what you have to say, and he's very smart, but it's just a little bit too much right now. It doesn't make him quite electable." And we'd say, "But it's constitutional." And we say, "Yeah, we know, but people aren't really going to buy in that. We're going to go with somebody else. And then when we get somebody else in the office and we get a hold on that, then we'll push for the Constitution." Well, you and I and everyone have seen that done over and over and over again, and it has never worked. We make these compromises, and we think that things are going to change, and then guess what? It's politics as usual. So I went on to the convention in the state, and I was walking down a hall, and I passed a man I had never met before. And we just made eye contact briefly, nodded at each other, and went on our way. No big deal. 2 years later, I was sitting in a coffee shop with a group of business owners, and I had come in late, and there's a man there standing up talking. And something felt familiar. I wasn't quite sure what it was, but the man started talking about the Constitution and talking about natural rights and God-given rights, and everything he said resonated with me. And everything he talked about what our Constitution was supposed to do and what our politicians were supposed to do and our government was supposed to do resonated with me. And at the end, I jumped up and I ran forward and I was like, "I have to know who you are." And that man's name was Denny Falk. And I started my journey with the John Birch Society. In 2016, I was sitting down in a Denny's with the regional director of the John Birch Society, and he said to me, "Al, so what time do you think it is in our nation?" And if you're military, you understand what I'm about to say. I said, "Sir, I think it's about 23:15 hours. And he said, "You know, you're probably about right." I sensed there was a problem in America. I was fighting things like abortion on demand. Our family was fighting educational issues like a Common Core curriculum. My wife's an educator, by the way. As a healthcare provider, as a registered nurse, I was seeing things happening in healthcare. And if anybody tells you we don't want single payer, they're not being truthful to you. That is the target, that is the goal, is that single payer healthcare system. But we weren't getting ahead. Good people would come forward with good information against all these things and why these things were bad, and it would be dismissed. And if any of you are watching the news now or follow YouTube, there are a lot of very smart people coming out, speaking out against things going on in healthcare. And we keep getting disappeared on the internet. And you open up your Facebook and there's a banner there and you're gone. It's amazing. And he said, "Well, so Al, how's that going for you?" And I said, "Well, it's not going too good." He said, "Tell me something, Al." And this was the eye opener for me. He said, "When you pick fruit off a tree, what usually happens? I said, well, nothing. The next season, the fruit grows back. He said, exactly. He said, if you prune a tree and cut back some of the branches, what happens? And I said, well, if you're good at it, the tree not only comes back, it comes back more hardy and bears more fruit the next year. He said, is that what you want to happen to the tree that you've been picking the fruit off of, trying to get rid of? And I said, no, it's not. He said, well, then what do you need to do? I said, well, you need to dig that tree up by the root and throw it into the fire. He said, exactly. There's a principle in manufacturing and production and logistics called root cause analysis. And root cause analysis is basically when you look at a system and something in that system is not working right, you start to ask the question, why isn't that working? And then the answer to that, you go, and why is that, and why is that, and why is that? Probably about 5 or 6 times until you get down to the root cause of what really the problem is, okay? I tell you now, everyone thinks there's a problem with America. Everyone thinks there's a problem with the Constitution. Not just people on the so-called left, but also people on the so-called right. People on the so-called left want to change the Constitution out completely. People on the so-called right think the Constitution needs to be amended by an Article 5 convention. The Constitution is not the problem, people. I hate to say it, we, the people, are the problem. Many of us through no real awareness of our own, okay? We elect people who we think are going to do what we unfortunately ourselves are unwilling to do. I see it all the time. We elect someone to office and say, Joel will do it, and then we go back and we rest on our laurels. We watch our TV, we eat our pizza, we drink our beverage of choice, and we say, we're busy, we don't have time for it. That's why we elected those smart people to go ahead and take care of things for us. And then we wonder about that. The other thing we do is we hire people, and I did say hire, we elect people to office who many times, oh, they're like us. It's like a popularity contest back in high school. Oh, I like them. I don't care if a person's likable or not. Is the person constitutional? Okay? We elect those people, and we're shocked when what we want to happen doesn't happen, because we find out those people are of less than noble character. Okay? Noble character is knowing the truth and being willing to do the truth no matter how hard it is. That's noble. And we're shocked and we're surprised, but we did elect people who are just like us. And unfortunately put in the same situation for lack of doing the heavy lifting, many of us given that level of power and responsibility and lack of support and accountability around us to hold us up and guide us when we go astray, we would do the same things that they do. And many people go into public office without the adequate amount of knowledge about the Constitution, the founding documents, because many of them were raised in the same public and private schools that we were. Hosea 4:6 says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Thomas Jefferson said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. And for the longest time, our people have enjoyed freedom without knowing and embracing the source of that freedom. Knowledge makes a man unwholly fit to be a slave, Frederick Douglass. So, what do we do about it? I talk in circles amongst you, and let me tell you, I'm so glad to be here in Roseburg today, because this is very different than the reception that you get in Tacoma, okay? It was alluded to earlier that I'd go into a little bit about what happens when you throw a constitutional rally in Tacoma. Many times, the Republican Party in the county doesn't even show up. We did a 6-month constitutional series, and a handful of people showed up, and none of the people that were there, well, okay, 2 of them, were actually party officials. They just get beat down and apathetic. And a lot of times they think, okay, well, at the next election, we'll get somebody in and they'll really make a difference. And slowly it becomes 11:30, and it becomes 11:45, and now it's like 11:50, folks, okay? So how do you get people to follow you? You talk to people, and people say, yeah, you're talking about the Constitution, and you have all kinds of knowledge that you're laying down on people, the truth. And it should resonate with them like it resonates with you. But if you don't understand and don't see it by now, let me tell you, you are a particular and unique people. Something happens when you do that Pledge of Allegiance, if it's in your heart like it is with me. Something happens when you stand there and you hear America the Beautiful, and you get the thrills up and down your spine. I was raised in a very patriotic household, and that's where I'm at. And I suspect that because you're all out here, you're of a similar bent. So most of the people you go out and you talk to, they're like, you talk about the Constitution, a bunch of old dead white guys, you know, it's a new day, it's a new time now. But the thing is that they really don't know. And the way that we have to get to those people, the adage goes, people don't care what you know until they know how much you care, caveat, about what matters to them. Because people have their self-interest, and they're self-serving and selfish. Why? Because they're scared. They're scared and don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And we have to come to them in a kind but firm manner and educate them as to what the founding documents and the Constitution are really, really about. And unfortunately, we haven't been living out the Constitution like we should as a nation, if we're going to be honest about it. So what do? We go to people with caring, conviction, firmness, and love, and we educate them about the Constitution. Tell them about how the Constitution is written and structured. Use the power of the spoken word. Read founding documents and commentaries. Educate yourselves first so that you can go out and then educate other people. Get around like-minded people. Association, power of association is the next most important power, because together we're stronger, together we support and uplift each other, and together we keep each other accountable in case one or the other of us goes astray. There was a story of Moses during a battle where he was supposed to hold his arms up and eventually got tired, and men came alongside him and held his arms up. Whenever his arms would go down, the children of Israel would lose. Whenever his arms were held back up, the children of Israel would win. We need to come alongside each other as sisters and brothers and hold each other up and hold each other accountable when we go astray and when we just get tired and weary of doing what we need to do. Success is an uphill battle, and we're going to struggle. Get used to it. You're going to work 8, 10, 12 hours a day, and then you're going to have to get off and go out and talk to people. Some people that you may disagree with and not necessarily like so much, but you love them, and you allow him to love them through you. And that's how we begin to see a change, and that's how we begin to win this nation back for God and for our children. Get to classes, get training in constitutional solutions. There's a series the John Birch Society puts out called Constitution is the Solution. There's a course that Hillsdale does, which is an excellent course on the Constitution. Not only study it yourself, give it to your children and your grandchildren, because those are the people that are going to come up behind us. We have to educate, enlighten, and empower ourselves so that we can then in turn educate, enlighten, and empower others so that we can all come together and uphold this nation. That's how we get ourselves together. That's how the whole world comes together. And in closing, I'd like to read you something that you're familiar with. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty, not for, but to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. I thank you for your time. God bless you all, and God bless the United States of America.
Wow, excellent. Thank you, Al. I'm so glad he ended with the preamble to the Constitution, too, and it says at that very last sentence, do ordain and establish. We don't have to establish it, folks. That work was done. What we have to do is reaffirm it. And we got to be passionate about that. We got to get out there. Hopefully today, if this has been inspiring to you to leave here not defeated. You know, everyone came here against a state order, didn't they? It's called the First Amendment, too, right to peacefully assemble. Nobody burning something, tearing it up, stomping on cars, beating on people, just assembling peacefully. And Al said it too, that our association together, our ability to get together is absolutely required. It's inspiring to us, it empowers us, and if you think it's a coincidence that we've been isolated from one another during this time, oh no, it's not. So be encouraged, be very encouraged today by what you've heard, and we're going to close with some patriotic music. Again, a reminder that at the table, if you want to get some courses, but here's the other thing too, don't wait to go get all constitutional until you get fully trained. Just get out there right now. Do what you did today. Exert your rights. Some of you exert the Second Amendment every day. Some of them are doing it right now as we speak. I love that. But know those rights. It'll take you 31 minutes to read the whole Constitution. You know, some people say, did you ever read the Bible cover to cover, every single word and begat? And I'd have to say, honestly, not every single word. But I did with the Constitution, and that's no excuse, but I'll tell you, it's a lot easier, and it's quicker, and in 31 minutes you can have it done. And then let it start sinking in a little bit. You're going to read some things and you go, oh, I knew that, I knew about that. And that's just the Constitution, the 7 articles. Then you can do the Bill of Rights, and that's fun too. We used to do with our kids at the table, we'd have them, you know, what's the 2nd, what's the 5th Amendment, what's the 9th? And they could recite those pretty quickly. You know, at our table, we didn't have leftovers, we had right-overs. But that's just my family. That's just how we did it. But anyway, have some fun, but don't wait to become an expert to go start being constitutional. Do it now. And thank you so much for being here. Anything else, Tim, we have to add? Yes, we're having a military medley next, and that's to honor our armed forces. And thank you, and God bless each and every one that was here. Thank you. You're welcome.